It was none other than Andrei Sakharov himself who first led Memorial when it was founded 20 years ago. Initially, the Historical, Educational, Human Rights and Charitable Society, to quote its full name, was meant to document the Soviet Union's totalitarian past. But more recently, it gained a more acute prominence by also monitoring the present state of human rights in post-Soviet states, most notably perhaps in Chechnya. Last summer, Natalia Estemirova, a Memorial activist, was abducted while working there and later killed. The European Parliament's Human Rights Prize was awarded in name to 3 Memorial activists, one of them its chair, Oleg Orlov. Oleg Orlov, how did you become a human rights activist?
Well, I should say that I never liked the communist regime. And for some time, independent of any organization, I was involved in the printing and distribution of anti-communist leaflets. And when the opportunity arose during perestroika, I looked for new ways to make an effort to contribute to public life. I thought Memorial had the best prospects and was the best organization. So I joined Memorial, and over time, Memorial increasingly got involved in questions of contemporary violations of human rights, not just research into the past. At the end of the 1980s, I gradually came to lead this work in Memorial. To put it briefly, Memorial examines and researches violations of human rights, both in the past and in the present. It engages in educational work about our horrifying totalitarian past. Why? So that the totalitarian past is not repeated. As for our current work, it's not just research, it's resistance. Resisting violations of human rights today, now, and giving help to citizens who've endured such violations.
И я постепенно возглавил эту работу в мемориале.
With regards to human rights in Russia, are things better or worse since the fall of the Berlin Wall?
В России в последние годы ситуация...
In Russia, in the past few years, the situation has got worse. That's entirely obvious. It's getting worse in various ways. Of course, not everything is unambiguous. In some ways, one can see improvements. But taken as a whole, the trend in Russia is moving backwards, unfortunately. We've seen the reverse of previous achievements. The present powers in Russia view the idea of the defense of human rights in a very cool way, to put it mildly. For them, the defense of human rights is not a very attractive or appealing ideology.
What worries you most about the situation in Russia today?
Well, it seems to me that the most horrifying thing is violation of the right to life and the violation of the prohibition on torture. People in Russia are being tortured and killed. The state murders, not only through capital punishment, but execution without trial, left and right. Thousands of people are disappearing without a trace. For example, during counter-terrorism operations in the North Caucasus. And torture is being practiced in just about every police station.
Of all the projects that you work on, which is the one closest to your heart?
Well, personally, I focus on what we call flashpoints. That means the violation of humanitarian law in the course of armed conflict, in post-conflict situations, and on the edge of armed conflict, as is the case in the North Caucasus. I would not say that this situation is close to my heart. It tears at my heart. But it is my focus, and it's a very pressing problem.
What do you think about President Medvedev's recent reassessment of the Stalin era?
The president's most recent words on mass repression during the Stalin era were very true. He correctly and precisely called them a crime, and that's very good. And that simply shows that in the highest echelons of power in Russia, not everything is so unambiguous. As they say, in the Kremlin there are many different towers. It seems clear that, with regard to the assessment of the past, there's been some kind of struggle at the top going on recently. The rehabilitation or partial rehabilitation of Stalin naturally worries us a lot. In fact, the recent words of the president were quite a surprise. They were very clear and correct words, and they gave us hope.
Memorial also focuses on other countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union. How would you summarize the human rights situation in former Soviet republics?
You know, it's impossible to summarize the situation because the situation varies greatly among the various countries of the former USSR. The situations in the various countries have gone in contradictory directions. It worries us greatly that in these countries, the human rights situation has not improved since the collapse of the Soviet Union. If you look at Central Asia, for example, Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan, what kind of improvements can you see? I would say that the human rights situation is worse than it was under the Soviet Union. And in other countries, like Russia, Belarus, and Azerbaijan, after a period of improvement, the situation deteriorated rather seriously. The situation is ambiguous and gives us cause for both concern and hope. Take, for example, Ukraine, a very ambiguous situation. The country is at a crossroads.
And finally, how will the Sakharov Prize help your work?
Well, of course, the prize has been awarded to three of us, to Memorial. As we see it, the prize will, of course, help us and other human rights defenders make the same assessment. It's very important to us that people abroad value our work so highly. Why? Well, because occasionally you just throw up your hands and say, nothing's working, nothing's going right, because the situation's getting worse. So, such an award from overseas gives us hope. It gives us optimism against a background of pessimism. It gives us extra strength. And that's the most important element in this prize, that not just for me personally, but for my colleagues, it gives us strength to go on. And that's good.